research organization called Center for Social Studies in Surat. I would first like to thank Sulabh for inviting me here, and also for initiating me to think about sanitation first and then sociology of sanitation. I don't have, I won't go into detail, but what I do here is to pose a few questions, and maybe in the discussion session we can bring issues further. I would begin with two impressions. First is from 1914, a poem called Achut Ki Kavita by Hira Dome. And I would just read two lines from this poem. This was in Bhojpuri, and it is also considered as the first poem by an untouchable in Hindi. And it is widely recognized by the literatures of Hindi, from Amritlal Nagar, who recognized this and appreciated this in his preface to Up to Nacho Gopal. And the lines I quote is, "Kahan lo sutal bate, sunat na bate aap, dhom jani hamni ke, chue se deraile." If I translate, and it's addressed to God. "Oh God, why are you sleeping, not listening to us? Knowing that we are doomed, even you fear touching us." And the entire poem is a kind of complaint, and also it addresses to the situation, the contemporary. I won't go into detail, but the crucial point for me is the issue of touch. And I believe that any discourse on sanitation, particularly in India, has to squarely address the question of touch. The second is the embedded form of suffering, which is again quite particular to Indian context. And Hira Dome, when he is narrating, he is also somewhere rendering this suffering, which is structured, and I don't need to spell it out in this audience familiar with social system. The second impression I want to mention here briefly, I had a visual clip, but is from the advertisements of sanitary napkins. And if I'm sure you all must have seen these advertisements on TV. And the point I want to bring here in this discourse on sanitation is the whole yearning for freedom, to address the constraints which are bodily constraints of a woman, and which is specific to woman's body. So again, it's a kind of suffering, and these commercials also bring us to the whole idea of commodity, and how, when we talk about sociology of sanitation, how to bring that whole economy, the object, the commodity. And the connecting thread between Hira Dome's poem and a sanitary napkin is the waste, the discharge of waste. Now, thinking about these two, obviously bring the issue of gender and Dalit into this discourse. But what is more worrisome point is, and that's my first submission, it's provocative submission, is that the discourse on sanitation has primarily been, and I've connected with the two images I talked, and the aspects of touch and the waste commodification, the experiences of suffering later. But the first submission is that discourse on sanitation has primarily been waste-centric discourse. Now, it is cliche in social science to, particularly in non-Western countries, to say this. What I mean by this is that it's not that we don't have discourse on sanitation, but the dominant discourse on sanitation is either about public health, about urban governance. It's about primarily how to manage a public space. It treats human beings as a unit to be governed. Hence, the issue of waste is a social issue, but it is primarily a concern of the state, which state needs to address. On the other hand, another discourse is intertwined with the discourse of civility, and that's where the discourse on sanitation is closely linked with the civilizational discourse, where sanitation is equated, or one particular form of sanitation is equated with the progress. Hence, in the writings from Neeraj C. Chaudhary to colonial administrators, West is the ideal model. The point is that in this discourse, which still continues in the disciplines of urban health or public health, we don't have, it's primarily concerned about the body as a unit. It doesn't talk the entire Indian history where sanitation and cleanliness is also about mind. It's also about ritual cleansing. Now, how to bring that is an issue. And this is where Mahatma Gandhi comes quite significant in the discourse. I don't know how much time I can. So, in the West-centric discourse, West has to be converted into a unit, or the body is unit. West has to be converted as an object which needs to be managed, or its knowledge or information about this waste has to be managed. It is completely, there is that amnesia about the experiences of the waste. Secondly, when I talked about the West-centric discourse, in that discourse, obviously, because of the sociality and the context and the history, they don't have the units of governance which are divided along, historically injustice, along the line of historical injustice. Obviously, I'm mentioning the caste. Hence, in Indian context, where even the unit of governance is differentiated historically, and that experience is embedded, that kind of social context was not there when the knowledge or the entire discourse, the modern discourse on public health and sanitation was taking shape in West. So this is not to blame or complain, but this is to emphasize the significance of Gandhi. Gandhi, he conflated the public and the private. Hence, it was not merely about how to govern the social space or the public space. It was equally about how to govern your own body. So body and the social space got conflated. Secondly, for him, cleanliness was equally a matter of social as well as the physical body. And this is quite crucial. And this is why he emphasized that each member of his ashram must undertake the scavenging responsibilities. However, I mean this is a huge difference, and we can, and Gandhi has been taught in the discourse of sanitation quite often. However, as a social scientist, I think we need to step ahead, and we need to also examine Gandhi's language, Gandhi's concerns. And here, I mean, for me, Gandhi's experiments has to be distinguished from experiences. So I want to emphasize this distinction between experiment and experience. And this is where I think the recent Dalit discourses come into picture. And particularly what I have in mind is the emphasis on experience, Dalit experience. I want to, and scholars have argued, what I have in mind is a very recent book by Gopal Guru and Sundar Sarkar, and the entire debate which carried on in E.P. Raghu first, is that all forms of experiences, I mean, where they are distinguishing between embedded experience and lived experience. Because lived experience can, I mean, you can have a temporarily lived experience of scavenging as a government volunteer, but that has to be different from experience of an scavenger. So that distinction then brings to the issue of the difference between knowledge and experience. So you can have experience, you can have knowledge, but the claims are that you can't have the experience. And this is where I would end by posing this problem is how to, as a new discipline, how to address this knowledge about sanitation, about social body, about individual body, about waste, as well as and bring the social experiences which are equally historically embedded sufferings. Thank you.
You said something like sanitation is a concept of waste and something about that. Sir, I think I would like to disagree with it because like in our sociology thing, like for example, we used to know book about caste in India. It clearly says that the whole system of caste system functions on the duality between beauty and pollution. And when beauty and pollution are the defining things that have defined the entire structure of Indian society. So I like to understand that what is the perspective and from which vanguard are you trying to say that sociology of sanitation or sanitation is a Western concept and not an Indian one. Thank you.
No, I mean, before I take...
And I just wanted to ask, like, again as a provocation, you speak about the amnesia of experience of waste and, you know, and the sort of the lived and embedded experience of the horror and trauma of sort of experiencing waste in every day. And I was wondering where now in this platform, where there is a discussion happening, institute it as discipline. What will be how do we methodologically challenge that overcome that trauma and shock of him experiencing waste. Because if you look at the sort of kind of from the UN, WHO,
that waste or the entire knowledge industry in the West or scholars have not engaged with experience, and this is where I'm connecting both. As a historian, I'm trained in history. I would say, and I would go back to writings where I take insights, Agamben's writings on experiences and science, where he very convincingly argued that modernity has abolished the autonomous domain of experience that it earlier enjoyed. Now, this is not to say that experience evaporated in the discourse, in the philosophical concern. What he is saying is modernity and modern science is particularly mentioning made experience the locus, a repository to build its claims, which was not there earlier. Now, in Gandhi, when I brought Gandhi is significant because he brings that tension again. And he's probably, with whatever, with my all ignorance, he's the only person who engages and who gives experience equal footage to knowledge. And this is why Gandhi is crucial. Yet, the recent writings of Dalit discourse I mentioned asked questions to Gandhi because of the reasons I said. Where on differentiating between embedded forms of experience and lived experience in a quotidian sense. And I probably
I think he has very satisfactorily answered most of the questions. In fact, the issue that he has raised will take a very long time. And not only long hours, but long years. One point that I would like to mention is he mentioned the name of Iradom, whose poem of 1940 was published for the first time in Saraswati by Mahavir Prasad. And that poem really raised the issue. But go back to the 19th century AD, where Herod wrote the Siddha literature, and that literature abolishes the whole Siddha to be kept in the mind. Or you come to the 14th century, Lal of Kashmir, wrote her Bhakyari, a lady, wrote Bhakyari. That Bhakyari was later, in 1920, it was translated by Grierson. And that Bhakyari became the foundation of Rishi Parampara among the Sufi saints for 400 years in Kashmir. Where is the dirt? So here is the dirt. That dirt emerged as a result of certain socio-economic conditions created after colonial rule. This has to be examined, and I thank to everybody. And this critical question should be annexed at the proper place in the sociology examination. That will take the sociology
Thank you.